this is a piece of fiction that I wrote in 1972, I think. That was 43 years ago. It was very poorly written. And if you read it, what it was dealing with gender stereotypes, why some men like to oppress women, why other women like to be submissive. You know, something like 50 Shades of Grey. Very poorly written 43 years ago. What I'm focusing on right now are the issues impacting the American people today, and that's what I will continue to focus on, and what I think the American people want to hear.
All right, there you go. Bernie Sanders on Meet the Press. Joining us now is the Malzberg panel. C. Edmund Wright, columnist, Breitbart.com, American thinker, and David Goodfriend, Democratic strategist, former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Clinton. Let's start with you, David. Bernie Sanders. So I asked Rick Santorum, I said, if a Republican presidential candidate had it revealed on Friday of last week that, I don't care, 40 years ago, they wrote, and it got published, that women, while they're having sex with their husbands or boyfriends, are fantasizing about getting gang raped by 3 men at the same time, where that candidate would be on Monday, which is today, and he said, out. And you can't disagree with that, can you?
Well, Toto, we're not in Vermont anymore. These are the big leagues. And I think that Senator Sanders is experiencing that firsthand. I would bet that he was a little bit surprised and sideswiped by this one, and I think he should have seen it coming. And as to the comment about whether or not Republican or Democrat would be out by now, you know, I think time will tell whether or not this has actually damaged Senator Sanders, or whether it's going to be viewed, as he hopes, as something that was written as fiction. And you know what it reminds me of a little bit is when Newt Gingrich had written some fiction himself and spoken the first person as a Nazi watching the armed forces.
Let me ask you a question.
That's sort of the same idea. Now, David, now the question is whether it's a good enough defense to just say it was just fiction.
Well, let me just say, Edmund, before I go to you, am I playing into your hands here? You support Hillary. You're former secretary, staff secretary to Clinton, President Clinton. Did the Clinton camp release this?
No, I don't think. As far as I know, they didn't. But that's as far as I know, and I'm not.
All right, I know, but that's all I could ask you to answer. Do you think that? Do you think they released it?
I don't. I don't think.
All right,
they did.
Edmund, do you think they released it?
You know, not this early. I think someone else found it. But what's interesting, Steve, this sounds like, you know, Bernie Sanders' war on women. I can't wait for that meme to be part of the campaign.
Well, the problem is nobody's mentioned it. Chuck Todd had him on yesterday. That's on Meet the Press. That's where we played this from. And it was the 5th and last question of a 6-minute interview with no follow-up. Edmund? Did we lose Edmund?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I thought you said David.
No.
No, this is Chuck Todd doing what Chuck Todd does, and you know, Steve, this is why MSNBC and NBC have the ratings they do. You know, that was just astonishing. He waited till the end to do that. As Rick Santorum said, a Republican would be out.
Quickly, David.
Well, good journalism puts the screws to every candidate, and I think every candidate should be under the gun and asked about their past, and that includes Senator Bernie Sanders.
All right, but of course he wasn't, and I guess that would include Hillary Clinton, so we could bring up the child rapist that she defended and laughed about on the telephone, and we could bring up her representation of the Black Panthers and all that kind of stuff, and her experience on the Watergate Committee. If it's all fair game, I can't wait, David. We're coming back, folks. Part 2 of the panel. Don't go away. All right, we are back, and the panel is back. C. Edmund Wright and David Goodfriend. And I want to talk about a story in the Washington Post today, ladies and gentlemen. And this story in the Post trumpets the fact that nearly 400 people have been killed by police officers in this year, 2015. They go on to, it's really, I think, 385 is the number. And Edmund, if you read a little bit further down in the story, you learn that 80% of those 385 had lethal weapons on them. Further, the ones that didn't, 16% of the ones that didn't had a toy gun of some sort on them. I guess the question has to be, what the heck is the purpose of writing that when you get rid of 80% of the 385 and then the 16% of what's left? What's the point of writing a story about, what, 60 people or 50 people?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. The problem, Steve, is that the politics of policing, politics of law and order, is not nearly as predictable as it used to be. You know, it used to be conservatives were your law and order people, and the liberals were kind of the defense bar, stand up for the defendants. And what's happened, though, is as government's grown and police have become more aggressive, more militaristic, you don't have that divide anymore, the clean divide you used to have, except on the issue of like Ferguson and Baltimore, where you have the racial component. So the whole idea of how we look at statistics and policing, it's just not as easy to figure out anymore.
What about it, David?
Well, I actually agree somewhat with what my conservative friend just said, because when we talk about the state, the power of the state, nothing goes to big government like a police officer banging down your door. That really is the essence of the state coming into your private property or your person or your car, whatever it is. So we as a nation have always been very sensitive, the Fourth Amendment is proof of this, to protecting what we believe is our private property and our lives from government intervention. The NRA, for example, makes very clear in a lot of its literature that the reason why people should have a right to bear arms is because they should have a right to defend themselves. So when you say, look, 80,
but David, with all due respect, I don't want to get off on a tangent, because we're talking about this headline that that the evil police have killed nearly 400 people, and then when you read about it, they were almost all justified right off the bat.
The NRA would say to you, I believe, if they were on this program, look, those 80% of people had every right under the Second Amendment to bear arms.
No, but they weren't shot because they wait. They weren't. I'm not. First of all, probably in the localities they were shot, which is probably big cities, they didn't have a legal right to carry them. So, but the point is they weren't killed. They weren't killed because they were carrying them legally. They were killed. And by the way, they posed a threat with these illegal weapons to the cop. That's the point of pointing out.
That is the question. Did they pose a lethal threat to the police, or were they in possession of a firearm? Those are two very different questions.
Okay, Edmund, I just think that the Washington Post is pushing this agenda, which is only going to further prevent police officers, for instance, in cities like Baltimore, to back off or make them back off, and more black people are going to be dead, not from the police, but from other black people.
Yes, well, you're right. You make two great points. First of all, the headline writer was provocative for just the reason you said. But again, how long does it take to get to 385 dead folks in just Baltimore, Chicago, and Detroit? What's that, about 3 good weeks in those three cities? You're at 400.
Well, one of the things this article pointed out was that the rate at which people are dying at the hands of police is much higher in 2015 than it's been over the last 10 years. That's sort of an unassailable point. And that does beg the question of whether or not something is going on right now that is instigating greater deaths of American citizens at the hands of police.
Yeah, now, there is.
Okay,
it's the same thing, David. That's making more police die than this time last year. It's the fact that the police have been demonized by the president, by the attorney general or the former attorney general, and by the media. That's what's going on.
As I read the article, a lot of the data they showed was about people who were running away from police and shot in the back. And I don't think that really poses a lethal threat to a police officer if a person is running away.
David, I can't comment on that specifically.
I
can't comment on that specifically. If it happens the way it happened in South Carolina, that looks like the cop did wrong. If there's a fleeing felon rule, depending on what the perpetrator did prior to him running and what point away he is from the officer, that would all enter into it. I don't think there's an epidemic of shooting people in the back while they're running, just like there was no such thing as hands up, don't shoot. Final word, Edmund.
No, you're absolutely right, and I agree. The story from Charleston looks pretty bad on the police officer, but again, all of these cases are individual, you're right, Steve. The Washington Post trying to stir up trouble.
Yep. All right, gentlemen, great debate. Thank you very much, C. Edmund Wright and David Goodfriend. We'll speak to you soon. Up next, Real Clear Politics columnist Heather Wilhelm will be here. Don't miss this one.